The cabin air was thick with recycled chill and the faint scent of citrus disinfectant. Miles Carter adjusted the cuff of his navy suit. Quiet, composed, a black man seated in first class, row 2A. He'd boarded early, laptop open, typing notes on a multi-million-dollar acquisition meeting waiting in Tokyo. Then came the pause. A flight attendant, blonde, crisp uniform, practiced smile, stopped me. Her gaze flicked from his skin to his boarding pass. The smile faltered. "Sir," she said, voice dipped in syruped politeness, "this is first class. Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Miles looked up slowly. Around him, heads turned, some curious, others smugly entertained. His jaw tightened. "I know where I am." She leaned closer, whispering, "If you can't afford this, I can help you find your assigned seat." The words sliced through the air. The nearby businessman smirked. Someone stifled a laugh. The humiliation burned cold. A phone camera clicked. A passenger began filming. Miles didn't speak. He simply tapped his screen, the airline logo lighting his face, and waited. Then the intercom cracked. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts." But the captain's name, announced seconds later, froze the cabin. "This is your captain, Ethan Carter, welcoming you aboard." The flight attendant's smile collapsed as Miles lifted his eyes, steady and razor-sharp. He was no ordinary passenger, and by the time they landed, everyone would know exactly who he was. The airport gleamed like a cathedral of glass and commerce, clean, bright, and indifferent. Miles Carter's reflection stared back at him from a duty-free perfume display, tailored navy suit, silk tie eyes that had learned restraint. He moved toward gate 42, briefcase in hand, passing screens that flashed words like priority boarding and exclusive lounge access. The phrases always felt like coded tests. At the counter, the attendant barely looked up. "Coach is boarding at gate 47, she said automatically. Miles placed his ticket on the counter. "First class, Tokyo Carter." A blink, then the flicker, that half-second of recalibration, the quick scan of his clothes, skin, watch. "Oh, of course, right this way." Her smile tightened. He walked through, every step rehearsed calm. A server at the lounge passed him twice before taking his order. A guard double-checked his boarding pass, though no one else's. None of it new. When boarding was announced, he waited until Group 1, deliberately not rushing. Inside the jet bridge, the hum of engines grew louder, the smell of jet fuel cutting sharp through the recycled air. The flight attendant met him at the cabin door, a perfect corporate smile. "Good evening, sir. May I see your ticket?" He handed it over. Her brows lifted. "Sir, this is for first class." "It is." The moment stretched. People behind him began to shift impatiently. Someone sighed. She leaned in, voice soft enough for the crowd but sharp enough to sting. "We just have to be sure. You understand?" Miles's jaw flexed. "Completely." She looked past him. Then, at the empty seat marked to a. Finally, she stepped aside. "Enjoy your flight," he said, laptop open, screen glowing. Behind him, whispers rippled. A man in a suit muttered, "Entitlement these days." He ignored it. Years had taught him that silence, strategically placed, could wound deeper than rebuttal. But silence fractured when the same attendant returned minutes later. "Sir, we've had issues before with passengers moving up from economy. I just need to confirm your boarding group." He looked up. "You've already seen my tickets." "I know. It's procedural." The phone camera clicked from 2 rows back. Someone murmured, "This is getting good." Miles inhaled once. Slow. "You're embarrassing yourself," he said quietly. Her smile faltered. He turned back to his screen. Moments later, the intercom came alive. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain, Ethan Carter, welcoming you aboard Flight 709 to Tokyo." The words froze the air. The attendant blinked. "Miles Carter," she whispered under her breath. "Carter." He looked up, meeting her gaze. "My brother," he said. Outside. The jet door sealed with a heavy metallic thud, the sound of consequence closing in. The plane leveled out above the clouds, sunlight flashing off the wings like fractured glass. The seatbelt sign went dark, and the cabin settled into murmurs, the hush of privilege, champagne clinking, devices humming. Miles leaned back, face unreadable, eyes half closed as though asleep. In truth, he was listening. "Diversity quotas are killing standards," one man, in to see, muttered to his companion. "You can't even fire incompetence without HR calling it bias." His friend laughed under his breath. "Don't worry, the pendulum swings back, always does." Their words flowed easily, lubricated by comfort and shared assumptions. Miles stared straight ahead, watching the silver tray approach. The same attendant, Julia, according to her badge, moved down the aisle, serving others first, skipping his row. When she finally reached him, her tone sharpened. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" "Water's fine." She poured it slowly, as if testing boundaries. "You know," she said, careful smile pasted on, "we just want to make sure everyone's comfortable. Some people get sensitive." Miles's gaze flicked to her. "You mean people like me?" The smile faltered. No, not at all. I just save it." His voice was even, almost detached. "You're too practiced to slip by accident." That was deliberate. She stiffened. "I don't appreciate being accused of then don't perform prejudice, and call it procedure." The air between them thickened. The two men nearby went silent. Julia's jaw clenched, but she forced a polite nod and moved on. Heels striking the floor like metronome beats of control, Miles exhaled slowly, turning toward the window. White clouds stretched endless, a purity that mocked the ugliness within the cabin. He opened his laptop, typing, not for work but to center his thoughts. Power doesn't reveal character, it unmasks it. A soft voice interrupted. The passenger across the aisle, a middle-aged Asian woman, leaned forward slightly. "That was brave," she said quietly. He shook his head. "It was necessary." Her eyes softened. "They'll twist it against you. They always do." He gave a half smile. "I'm used to the rewrite." The hum of engines deepened. Somewhere in the economy, a baby cried, muffled by the heavy curtain dividing classes, the literal and symbolic barrier. Julia pulled it closed, sealing separation again. Minutes passed. The Wi-Fi connected. Notifications buzzed faintly. Miles noticed movement 3 rows up. A young passenger, phone tilted low, whispering excitedly. A video. Uploaded already. The earlier confrontation. Captured in crisp 4K humiliation. He watched as the thumbnail froze on Julia's expression. Condescension immortalized. He could feel the ripple building. Within hours, this would become more than personal. It would become public. Julia passed by again, eyes darting nervously toward his screen. "Everything all right, sir?" He looked up, measured. "Everything's just beginning." Her mouth parted slightly, uncertain whether it was a threat or a fact. Then the seatbelt sign lit again. A flicker of turbulence warning. The captain's voice, steady, practiced, came through the speaker. "We're expecting mild turbulence ahead, folks. Please remain seated." Julia steadied herself against a seat. Miles listened closely. That voice, his brother's, confident, unaware of the storm about to break far below and within. Outside, thunder rippled distantly against a bruised horizon. Inside, the divide had already cracked by the time Flight 709 crossed the international date line. The internet had already decided what had happened. The 30-second clip. Flight attendant questions black man in first class spread like wildfire. Tens of thousands of views turned to millions before the plane even touched land. Each replay carved deeper into the airline's polished image. Miles didn't have to watch. He could feel it moving, a digital tide building beyond the sealed fuselage. The hum of the engines seemed quieter now, subdued under the invisible noise of the world watching. Julia sensed it too. Her smile had vanished, replaced by a mechanical rhythm. Pour, collect, repeat. She avoided his role altogether. The two executives, who had mocked quotas earlier, were now whispering furiously over their screens. "It's trending," one muttered, voice tight. "The airline's PR is already in meltdown." Miles remained still, eyes closed, headphones untouched. His restraint unnerved them more than anger could have. Across the cabin, a flight supervisor leaned close to Julia. "We've been informed," he whispered urgently. "The captain's been contacted. That video's everywhere." Julia's face blanched. "Everywhere," he nodded. "Corporate wants a statement ready before landing." Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted a napkin. "I didn't mean to. Intent doesn't matter anymore," he cut in. "Perception does." Miles caught fragments of the exchange. Tone, not words. The same tone that filled boardrooms after PR disasters. He'd heard it all before. Only now, he wasn't the outsider. He was the weight behind the table. The irony gnawed quietly beneath his calm. He pressed his fingers against his temple. The fatigue creeping in. Beneath every victory lay exhaustion. The kind that came from carrying proof of dignity through every room, every system that doubted it. Ding. A message appeared on his screen. A direct ping from Ethan. "Ethan Carter, Saw something online. What's going on back there? Miles typed back slowly. Miles, just turbulence. Ethan's response came almost instantly. Ethan, corporate's panicking. Legal team on call. You okay? Miles, fine. Focus on flying. The chat went silent. Miles shut the laptop, the faint reflection of his own face staring back. A man perpetually forced to choose between silence and spectacle. The passenger beside him finally spoke. Sir, if you don't mind me asking, are you really a businessman? Miles interrupted. That's all you need to know. The man nodded quickly, embarrassed. It's just, the video, it's everywhere. People are saying I know what they're saying. He glanced toward Julia again. She was standing by the galley, head bowed, muttering into her crew phone. The captain's voice broke through the intercom. Ethan's voice, steady but slightly strained. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some communication issues. Please remain seated. Miles exhaled, recognizing the tone. His brother was improvising under pressure. Caught between professionalism and personal awareness. Julia returned moments later, face pale. Mr. Carter, she began hesitantly. May I have a moment? He didn't look up. You already had your moment. The internet made sure of it. She swallowed. I want to apologize for what, the words or the assumption behind them. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. You looked at me, he said quietly, and made a decision. You saw something that didn't fit your expectation of this seat. That's not confusion. That's conditioning. Her eyes glistened. I didn't mean harm. Intent doesn't undo harm, he said, voice low but razored. You didn't need to mean it. You just needed the comfort of thinking you were right. Julia's hands fidgeted with the edge of her apron. They're saying I'll be suspended. Miles closed his eyes. That's not my decision, but it's a consequence. Her voice cracked. Please, say something, anything. He turned his head slowly. You want my words to fix your image, not your conscience. Silence. Julia stepped back, shoulders trembling. The nearby passengers pretended not to hear, but every word had landed. The supervisor approached, voice clipped. Sir, we apologize for any distress. I'm not distressed, Miles replied evenly. You are. The supervisor froze. Miles looked around the cabin, eyes sweeping across faces that now avoided his. I'm fine. I've had practice. Then, he picked up his phone, typed a single message, and hit send. Miles, Carter, Ethan, don't land quietly. When the captain's voice came again, it carried a faint charge beneath the professionalism. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We'll be making an early descent into Narita. Please prepare for landing. Corporate representatives will meet passengers upon arrival. Julia gripped the galley counter. Her reflection in the metal panel looked nothing like the calm, confident attendant who had boarded hours ago. The man in to see muttered, Jesus, this is a PR nightmare. His companion whispered back, who is this guy? Miles didn't answer. He simply adjusted his watch, a custom Patek Philippe, engraved discreetly with Carter Holdings, and stared out at the thinning clouds. The horizon was glowing orange, the first light of Tokyo dawn breaking through. It looked like fire spreading across the edge of the world. By the time they landed, his name would already be trending. The airline stock would begin to fall. Ethan's inbox would overflow, and the mask of civility that had hidden so many small cruelties would finally begin to tear. Miles sat perfectly still, watching the sunlight crawl across his sleeve. Everything he'd endured quietly for years, every meeting, every look, every whispered doubt was converging into this moment of exposure. The world was about to learn what dignity looks like when it stops asking for permission. The cabin lights dimmed as Flight 709 began its slow descent through unsettled skies. Wind buffeted the fuselage, the muted roar of turbulence rising beneath the soft chime of the seatbelt sign. Passengers murmured prayers, clutched armrests, or simply stared ahead, waiting for it all to pass. Miles Carter sat motionless. His calm wasn't the product of ignorance, it was disciplined, built from years of masking anger that could never safely surface. Across the aisle, Julia stood rigid in the galley, knuckles white on the metal rail. Her supervisor had stopped speaking to her entirely. The crew interphone crackled with low static. She could hear fragments of the captain's voice. Corporate communications, crisis team, media reception on arrival. Her chest tightened. The humiliation she had once inflicted now circled back, public, amplified, irreversible. She approached slowly. Mr. Carter, she said, voice trembling but formal. I'd like to offer you a written apology for company records. We're required. Miles raised a hand without looking up. Stop. I just need. He turned his head slightly, eyes cold. You're still treating this like procedure. Julia swallowed. I'm trying to fix it. You're trying to survive it, he said. Not the same thing. Her lips parted to reply, but a pocket of turbulence cut her words short. The plane jolted sharply, sending a ripple of gasps through the cabin. The beverage carts rattled. A glass shattered somewhere behind them. Everyone, please remain seated, Julia stammered into the intercom, her professional tone barely holding. Miles watched her hands tremble as she replaced the handset. The irony didn't escape him. She was now the one struggling to hold composure under pressure. The seatbelt sign glowed amber overhead, pulsing faintly like a warning heart. He spoke quietly, not looking at her. When the storm hits, you learn what's steady inside you. Today, you're learning. Julia stood frozen, shame threading through every breath. I never thought. That's the point, Miles said. You never had to. She flinched, tears forming that she tried to hide. For once, the flight attendant uniform, polished, pristine, looked like armor cracking under truth. The turbulence subsided gradually. Ethan's voice filled the cabin again, low and deliberate. Ladies and gentlemen, we're passing through the last air pocket. Thank you for your patience. The passengers exhaled in collective relief. Julia sank against the galley wall, silent. Miles leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, listening to the engine's hum. His mind wasn't on her anymore. It was on the structure behind her, the invisible chain that made her behavior ordinary, excusable, expected. He remembered the board meetings where coded phrases disguised exclusion, fit the culture, client-facing image, market comfort. He'd built empires out of rooms that doubted he belonged in them, and every victory carried the taste of restraint, never satisfaction. A soft chime. Another message appeared on his screen from Ethan. Ethan Carter. Corporate just confirmed reporters waiting at Nari. Do you want privacy when we land? Miles? No. Let them film everything. He closed the laptop and stared out the window. Below, the Pacific was a mirror of pale steel. In its reflection, he saw not vengeance, only inevitability. Julia lingered a few steps away, still shaken. You could destroy me, she said softly. Miles's reply was almost a whisper. You destroyed your own image. I just didn't help you hide it. She turned away, hands pressed to her face. The captain's voice came once more. Cabin crew, prepare for landing. Julia straightened, performing the final safety check, mechanical in movement, but hollow in presence. Her composure was gone. Her career, perhaps too. Miles folded his hands. The engines deepened their pitch, the city lights glimmering faintly through low cloud. To every other passenger, it was a routine landing. To Julia, it was descent. To Miles, it was exposure not of her alone, but of the entire structure that had allowed moments like this to repeat endlessly in silence. The wheels struck tarmac with a heavy, echoing thud, but aircraft slowed, engines winding down. A collective exhale spread through the cabin. Julia faced forward, eyes red. Welcome to Tokyo, she murmured into the intercom, her voice flat, stripped of polish. Miles opened his eyes. The words carried no comfort, only the weight of consequence. The door would open soon. Cameras would flash. Statements would be demanded. But for now, in that suspended silence between landing and arrival, there was only the sound of a system trembling. Tokyo Narita's tarmac shimmered under morning haze, still, expectant, like the calm eye of a brewing storm. The jet bridge hadn't even locked before. Miles noticed movement outside. Camera crews clustering at the gate, flashes firing through glass, reporters pressed against barriers, microphones raised like weapons. Word had traveled faster than the plane. The seatbelt sign pinged off, passengers unbuckled, murmurs filling the cabin. Some glanced at Miles, curious, apologetic, uneasy. Others avoided looking at him entirely. Julia stood at the exit, pale and rigid. Her forced composure had drained into something quieter, fear. Miles didn't move immediately. He watched the line form, each person hurrying toward the door, as though escaping contamination. When his turn came, Julia tried to meet his gaze. He didn't give her that courtesy. Have a pleasant, she began, but the words died in her throat. He stepped past her without acknowledgement. Outside, the terminal's noise swallowed everything. Camera shutters, shouted questions, the dull hum of fluorescent lights. Mr. Carter, is it true you were discriminated against? Did the flight attendant use racial language? Are you pressing charges against the airline? He kept walking. Security guards and airline officials flanked him instantly, clearing a narrow path. His expression remained steady, neither anger nor satisfaction, only controlled. Ethan was waiting near customs, still in his pilot's uniform, cap tucked under his arm. His face betrayed exhaustion, guilt, and quiet relief. You okay? Ethan asked, voice low. Miles adjusted his cuff. You shouldn't have come out here, corporate insisted. They want me at the press briefing. Of course they do. Ethan studied him for a moment. You're trending worldwide. They're calling it first class while black. Miles exhaled through his nose, a small shake of his head. Catchy, simplistic, marketable. The media barrier shifted as reporters shouted new questions louder, hungrier. Ethan guided him through a side corridor, leading toward the VIP terminal. Inside, a small contingent waited. Airline executives in tailored suits, faces molded into corporate grief. Their spokesperson, a woman with practiced sincerity, stepped forward. Mr. Carter, she began, we deeply regret the misunderstanding aboard Flight 709. We assure you, the airline has zero tolerance for. He cut her off. Don't insult me with policy language. Her smile stiffened. We only want to resolve this amicably. I'm not here to resolve your optics problem, Miles said. I'm here because your employee made my dignity a public debate. The room fell silent. Ethan glanced between them, uneasy. Another executive cleared his throat. If there's any settlement figure you'd consider. Miles's gaze snapped toward him. You think this is about money? The man hesitated. Well, damages. Miles stepped closer, voice controlled but lethal. You're looking at this like an incident report. I'm looking at it like a system study. You trained her to see hierarchy before humanity. That's not one employee. That's your culture. No one spoke. The silence was heavier than shame. It was recognition. He turned toward the window. Outside, the press swarmed, lights flashing like distant lightning. Ethan spoke quietly. They're asking for a statement before this escalates further. Miles looked back at him. It's already escalated. The spokesperson tried again, softer this time. Please, Mr. Carter. A brief acknowledgement. It would help everyone move forward. He paused long enough for them to believe he might comply. Then he said, You want a statement? Here's one. Your airline doesn't have a bias problem. It has a comfort problem. You built a system where courtesy only flows upward. Her mouth opened slightly. No rebuttal came. Miles turned to leave. Ethan followed, quick steps echoing down the corridor. Where are you going? Ethan asked. To the boardroom, Miles replied. It's time the investors heard what their brand really stands for. Ethan slowed. You mean you're going to make this official? Miles looked at him. You think I'm just a passenger, Ethan? Ethan frowned, confused. Who do you think helped finance your airline's merger 3 years ago? Miles said quietly. Check your shareholder registry. Ethan froze. Miles continued walking, unbothered by his brother's shock. This stopped being personal hours ago. Now it's structural. They reached the terminal exit. A black sedan waited, tinted windows glinting in the pale light. Before entering, Miles turned briefly toward the reporter shouting his name. He didn't wave, didn't speak. Cameras captured his silence like it was scripture. Inside the car, Ethan finally found his voice. You could ruin them. Miles stared out the window. No, I'll teach them what ruin looks like. The city blurred by glass towers, billboards, the indifferent machinery of commerce. Miles's phone buzzed, hundreds of notifications, statements, public outcry, hashtags demanding justice. He ignored them all, opening one quiet message instead, a simple note from his assistant. Board meeting confirmed. 48 hours, executive panel prepared. He typed back. Good, let's make them listen. Outside, the clouds parted briefly, sunlight cutting across the skyline. Not a symbol, just a brief illusion of clarity. Ethan glanced sideways. You sure about this? Miles's reply was barely audible. No one's ever sure when the truth lands. He leaned back, closing his eyes. The hum of the engine felt like the airplane's ghost. The echo of what had started above the clouds now descending through boardrooms, headlines, and reputations. For Julia, it would mean disciplinary hearings and public condemnation. For the airline, a crisis spiraling beyond their control. For Miles, it meant something else entirely, vindication that felt less like victory and more like fatigue, the exhaustion of finally being seen for the wrong reasons. The car merged onto the expressway. Tokyo rolled past in sterile silence. Miles's phone buzzed again, another message from Ethan. This one hesitant. Ethan, they're calling you a hero. Miles looked at the message, then locked the screen without replying. Heroes were people who asked for none of this. He was just someone who stopped pretending. Outside, the storm he'd triggered kept building. 2 days later, Tokyo's skyline gleamed under sterile sunlight, the kind that made glass towers look like monuments to detachment. Inside the top floor of Atore's corporate headquarters, silence carried more weight than air. The boardroom stretched like an altar, 30 feet of polished oak, 12 men and women in dark suits, and one empty chair at the head. The chair was reserved for Miles Carter. Executives whispered in low tones. PR consultants scrolled through crisis dashboards. Every screen in the room pulsed with headlines, tweets, and news tickers. Air faces discrimination scandal. FBI consultant humiliated mid-flight. Public demands accountability. At 9:01 a.m., the door opened. Miles entered without announcement. No entourage, no expression, just precision black suit, no tie, minimal movement. His presence vacuumed the noise out of the room. Chairman Ota stood. Mr. Carter, thank you for joining us on such short notice. Miles took his seat at the head, placing a single folder on the table. We'll skip the courtesies. The legal counsel cleared her throat. Before we begin, I must remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded for compliance purposes. Good, Miles said. Transparency will be new for this company. A faint ripple of discomfort passed around the table. The head of public relations, a woman named Tanaka, began with her slide deck. We've contained most of the external damage. We've issued a preliminary apology. Not an apology, Miles interrupted. A performance. She froze mid-sentence. He continued, voice even. You apologize to the public for how it looked, not for what it was. There's a difference, the chairman interjected, tone cautious. Mr. Carter, we understand your frustration, but we must act pragmatically. A single employee. Miles turned his gaze on him. Don't finish that sentence. The room stilled. He opened the folder and slid a document forward, internal memos, training manuals, and compliance records. This is your culture audit. I had my analysts pull every recorded bias complaint across 5 years. 42 formal submissions, 36 dismissed without escalation. For terminated, to settled quietly under NDAs. He looked up. That's not an isolated event. That's architecture. The CFO leaned forward. Even if true, publicizing internal documents could I already did. A stunned pause. Miles leaned back, unflinching. A redacted version went to the Civil Aviation Ethics Council this morning. They're reviewing your practices for systemic misconduct. Tanaka's jaw tightened. That's a declaration of war. Miles corrected her. It's a declaration of truth. The war started when one of your employees looked at my skin before my credentials. Ethan entered quietly, summoned by the chairman as a reluctant intermediary. His uniform was gone. He wore a gray suit that didn't fit his discomfort. Miles, he said softly, there's a better way to do this. If we destroy the airline, thousands of innocent employees lose their jobs. Miles didn't look at him. You think I'm here to destroy something? I'm here to disinfect it. The CEO, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, voice low, sharp, and dangerous. Mr. Carter, we recognize your influence as an investor, but leaking internal documents that borders on corporate sabotage. Miles's expression didn't change, then filed the charge. The CEO's eyes narrowed. You think you can intimidate us because of your capital position? No, Miles said calmly, because of your dependence. He pressed a button on the remote. The screen behind him changed. A shareholder chart showing Carter Holdings as the airline's third largest private investor. The CEO's composure fractured. Miles stood, letting the silence settle. Your board forgot something fundamental. Money doesn't just buy seats, it buys accountability. You wanted investment, not interference. You got both. He walked to the window, overlooking the skyline. You built this company on image, safety, luxury, equality. But beneath that brand, you tolerated humiliation disguised as protocol. Julia wasn't the first. She was just the one who did it to the wrong person. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. What happens to her now? Miles didn't turn. She faced inquiry. Whether she keeps her job doesn't matter. What matters is the structure that taught her she was right to act that way. The CEO rose. You're overstepping. Miles faced him fully now. Tone surgical. You mistook silence for compliance. That's ending today. He closed the folder. Effective immediately. I'm calling an emergency vote of confidence under the shareholder clause. I have allies representing 28% of your equity. Add mine, that's 33%. If we reach 35%, you're out. Gasps around the table. The chairman tried to regain control. You wouldn't, I would, Miles said, stepping closer. Because you didn't just offend me. You offended every investor who believed you stood for something higher than profit. A tense pause, stretched brittle, absolute. Then Miles said, quietly but with finality, decide whether you want to fix your system, or let me replace it. No one spoke, no one blinked, boffed. Finally, the chairman bowed slightly, old pride giving way to survival instinct. We will cooperate with your reforms. Miles gave a single nod. Then this conversation stays internal. For now, he gathered the folder, turned toward Ethan, and said, you can walk me out. Outside the boardroom, Ethan exhaled heavily. You scared the hell out of them. I educated them, Miles replied. Ethan frowned. You think they'll actually change? Miles paused. They'll adapt. Fear is a temporary teacher, but exposure that leaves a mark. He entered the elevator. As the doors closed, Ethan caught his reflection in the mirrored panel. Same composure, same quiet gravity. Only now, the world knew who Miles Carter really was. Not a victim of circumstance, but the architect of accountability. Below them, the corporate machinery kept running. Press statements, social media outrage, polished apologies. But above that noise, something irreversible had begun. A shift from humiliation to reckoning. The elevator descended in silence. Each floor a quiet reminder of power reclaimed. Miles didn't smile. He didn't need to. The system had blinked first. The conference hall was packed to suffocation. Rows of cameras lined the aisles, their red lights blinking like tiny judgments. Reporters whispered, pens ready, voices hushed under the weight of what the day promised. The first public hearing on racial discrimination in commercial aviation, televised globally. Miles Carter sat at the front table, a microphone before him, his expression unreadable. He wore no designer label, no ornament, only the quiet precision of control. Across from him sat Julia Hayes, the flight attendant whose name had filled a million hashtags, now pale and trembling under the fluorescent glare. Between them, the Council of Five watched with practiced neutrality, an illusion no one believed. The chairman of the council, a dignified woman with steel-gray hair, adjusted her glasses. Mr. Carter, you have the floor for your opening statement. Miles's voice was calm, almost too calm. This hearing isn't about me. It's about every person who's been told they don't belong in a space they've already earned access to. It's about systems that protect humiliation and call it policy. His words settled over the room like frost. The chairman nodded. We'll proceed with testimony. Julia's lawyer rose. Ms. Hayes wishes to express remorse. Miles interrupted quietly. Let her speak for herself. Julia swallowed hard, voice shaking. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was following safety procedure. I thought. Miles leaned forward, eyes steady. You thought, what? Her words caught in her throat. I thought you didn't belong in first class. The room went silent. Cameras zoomed closer. Miles didn't move. Because I was black. Her face crumpled. I didn't think consciously, it's just subconsciously, Miles said. That's how the system survives. The chairman intervened softly. Mr. Carter, please. He raised a hand, not in defiance but to hold the silence. No, let the truth breathe for once. He turned to Julia again. You humiliated me in public, but this hearing isn't for revenge, it's for clarity. So let's make something clear. The problem wasn't your individual prejudice, it was the uniform that made you believe it was acceptable. Julia's tears fell quietly. I'm sorry. Miles's voice didn't soften. Sorry isn't reform. He turned to the council. You want to understand systemic bias. It's in every unrecorded complaint your office dismissed, every time a passenger of color was randomly selected for inspection, every memo that warned employees to be courteous but never accountable. The council's lead investigator shifted uneasily. We are implementing new diversity protocols. Protocols don't change culture, Miles cut in. Accountability does. The chairman leaned forward. Mr. Carter, what would accountability look like in your view? Miles paused long enough that the microphones picked up only the sound of someone exhaling in the third row. Transparency, he said finally. Mandatory bias audits, independent oversight, real consequences, and compensation for every passenger who filed a legitimate complaint that was buried for convenience. A ripple of murmurs spread across the audience. Reporters scribbled furiously. The chairman nodded slowly. Your demands are extensive. They're proportionate, Miles replied. Then, from the back, a voice rose, a man in a maintenance uniform, clearly nervous but resolute. He's right. The counsel turned sharply. The man continued, voice trembling. I worked ground crew for 5 years. I've seen first-class tickets voided for black passengers accidentally. Seen security called for nothing. The audience stirred, murmurs turning to low outrage. Miles didn't turn to look, but his jaw tightened slightly. The truth had multiplied. The chairman struck her gavel once. Order. But the order was gone. Reporters whispered. Phones buzzed. The hearing had become something else, a reckoning televised in real time. Julia's lawyer leaned toward her. We can appeal this internally. Miles's voice overrode him. You can't appeal conscience. He gathered his papers, then stopped. I don't want this to end with apologies or policy drafts. I want it to end with admission. Julia looked up, mascara smudged, and whispered, I discriminated against you. It wasn't loud, but it echoed. The microphones caught every syllable. Miles stared at her for a long, measured moment. Then he said quietly, That's the first honest thing you've said since this began. The chairman raised her hand. We'll take this under deliberation and release a formal decision within 48 hours. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel hit, a sharp, wooden sound that split the tension but didn't relieve it. As the crowd erupted into movement, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, Miles rose slowly. Ethan appeared near the exit, holding the door open, face pale but determined. Was that enough? Ethan asked as Miles approached. Enough for them to start fearing silence. Miles said. Outside, the sky had dimmed, clouds folding over the city like bruises. The flashbulbs followed him down the steps, but Miles didn't flinch. He walked into the storm of voices, calm, deliberate, untouchable. Behind him, the sound of the gavel still rang in the air, not as closure, but as an opening act to something larger. The reckoning had gone public. The night after the hearing, the world refused to sleep. News feeds pulsed. Hashtags burned bright. Hashtag AETHER air exposed. Hashtag Miles Carter speaks. Hashtag systemic flight. Every headline circled back to the same image. Miles walking out of the courtroom. His expression calm, while the world behind him fractured. But inside his Tokyo penthouse, the calm was manufactured. The city stretched below him in glittering precision, but Miles stood in near darkness, eyes fixed on a single object, the black flight recorder now resting on his desk. Ethan entered quietly. You still have it. Miles didn't turn. It's a copy. The real one's locked in Etheraire's archive. Ethan frowned. You know you could have leaked this days ago. What's on it that matters now? Miles's voice was flat. Proof. He pressed play. Static filled the room. Then, faint voices, cabin noise, muffled chatter, Julia's sharp tone. So, I need to see your boarding pass again. You already checked it twice. This is standard procedure. Ethan winced as the recording captured the escalation. The cold politeness, the disbelief in Miles's voice, the soft gasp from passengers, and finally the single, quiet line that broke the internet. You think my seat doesn't fit my color, right? Then, silence. Miles stopped the playback. That's the sound of dignity being weighed against protocol. Ethan exhaled. You're planning to release it? Not yet. Miles turned toward the window. Tokyo reflected in the glass like a reversed constellation. First, I want the system that buried this audio to admit it exists. A knock interrupted them. It was Tanaka, Etheraire's PR head, the same woman who had defended the company days ago. Her tone was stripped of confidence now. Mr. Kata, the board agreed to your reforms. They're dissolving internal compliance and replacing it with independent oversight. But they're asking you not to release the black box. Miles's gaze sharpened. Why? Because it would destroy the brand completely. Thousands of jobs, entire routes suspended. We're trying to fix this internally. He studied her, expression unreadable. You want to fix optics, not ethics. Tanaka's composure faltered. You don't understand the scale of damage. I understand perfectly, Miles said. That recording isn't just about one flight. It's about every unchecked humiliation that followed company policy. Tanaka's voice lowered. You've made your point. But if you release that file, Etheraire collapses. Miles stepped closer. If the truth collapses you, then your structure was never built to stand. She hesitated, then left. Defeated. Ethan watched her go, then said quietly, if you leak it, You won't just be exposing them. You'll be detonating an entire industry. Miles's voice softened for the first time in days. Maybe that's the only language they understand. He pressed the intercom on his desk. Connect me to the Civil Aviation Council. Private line. Within minutes, a secure video feed appeared. The chairman from the hearing appeared, weary but alert. Mr. Carter, she said, I assume this isn't a social call. It's not. He held up the black recorder. You heard fragments of this audio in court. What you didn't hear were the internal timestamps, proving that corporate command reviewed the recording hours after the incident and deleted the report before the flight landed. The chairman blinked. You're saying, I'm not saying, I'm showing. He uploaded the digital logs, metadata, signatures, deletion traces. On her end, the screen filled with evidence. The chairman's face tightened as she read. This could implicate executive-level misconduct. It already does. Miles said, you wanted transparency. This is it. The line went silent for several seconds. Then she spoke softly. If this goes public, the airline won't recover. Miles's expression didn't shift. Then maybe something better can be built in its place. She hesitated, then said, give me 24 hours to prepare an official inquiry. After that, you can do what you must. The feed ended. Ethan leaned on the desk, tension visible in every muscle. So what happens in 24 hours? Miles looked out at the horizon, neon veins of the city stretching endlessly. Either they tell the truth, or I do. The next morning, social media erupted again, leaked rumors of internal recordings, anonymous posts hinting at deeper corruption. Reporters camped outside corporate towers. By evening, the Civil Aviation Council issued a statement. Evidence indicates deliberate data concealment by Ether Air's executive board. A full criminal investigation has been authorized. It was the first official crack in the system. Miles watched the announcement from his suite. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, just turned to Ethan and said, the black box doesn't lie. People do. Ethan nodded. And now, Miles picked up his phone. Now, we see who calls first, the ones who want to destroy me, or the ones who want to join me. As the city lights dimmed under the weight of breaking news, one thing became clear. The truth had escaped containment, and the system built to silence it was starting to burn. Rain battered the runway lights at Hanada Airport hard, relentless, cleansing. Cameras clustered along the terminal glass as Ether Air's CEO stepped out of his black sedan, surrounded by security. Inside the terminal, a wall of reporters waited. Miles was already there, standing by the press podium, calm, centered. His image had become iconic, a man who spoke softly and shattered institutions. The black flight recorder rested on the podium, like evidence and symbol both. The CEO approached, his face a mask of corporate endurance. You leaked the council's findings, he said in a low voice. Do you know what you've done? Miles's answer was steady. I made sure the truth couldn't be edited. The press surged closer as microphones angled in. Mr. Carter, shouted one reporter, can you confirm that Ether Air executives deleted evidence from a discrimination case? Miles looked at the sea of lenses, each recording his every blink. You don't need confirmation from me. You need the courage to read their own files. He stepped back as the large screen behind him flickered to life. The council's official broadcast, the chairwoman's voice filled the air. Following investigation, Ether Air's board is found complicit in data suppression, ethical misconduct, and obstruction of inquiry, effective immediately. The airline's senior leadership is suspended pending legal action. Gasps, cameras clicked like gunfire. The CEO's composure shattered for the first time. You think this is justice, he hissed. You destroyed a company. Miles's voice dropped to a near whisper. No, you destroyed it the day you let humiliation fly business class. Julia Hayes, standing in the background beside her legal counsel, flinched. Her face was thinner now, haunted. She stepped forward hesitantly. Mr. Carter, he turned. Her words trembled. They've terminated me, but I'm testifying in the trial against the board. I just wanted you to know, I'm trying to make it right. Miles studied her for a long moment. You can't erase what happened. I know, she said, voice breaking, but I can stop pretending it was okay. For the first time, his tone softened by a fraction. Then maybe you've learned something the system never did. A nearby monitor streamed live reactions, protests at airports, passengers demanding reform, employees walking out in solidarity. The movement had spread. Ethan approached, phone in hand. You've been invited to speak before the Global Aviation Summit next month. They're calling it the Carter Clause, Mandatory Transparency Protocols for Bias Incidents. Miles's eyes flickered toward the rain-streaked glass. Names change nothing. Systems do. Ethan smiled faintly. Still, poetic, isn't it? Miles didn't answer immediately. Outside, a grounded Ether Air jet sat on the tarmac, its logo half covered by rain, colors running like gilt-down metal. He finally said, "Poetic justice isn't about symmetry, it's about consequence." Reporters surged again as he walked past them. "Mr. Carter, do you feel vindicated?" One shouted. Miles stopped, half-turned voice, low but audible through every mic. "Vindication is for stories. Accountability is for reality." He walked on, coat brushing against his legs, the crowd parting around him like current around stone. Behind him, chaos and history mixed. Executives escorted out in handcuffs, investors scrambling, a global industry rewriting its manuals overnight. Miles stepped outside into the rain. The cameras followed, but he didn't pause for them. Ethan caught up. "Where to now?" "Home," Miles said. "And then somewhere quieter. There's always another system pretending it's clean." They reached the car, and as Miles opened the door, a voice called out, one of the younger reporters, "Mr. Carter, if you could say one thing to the people watching right now." Miles looked back, rain dripping from his coat, eyes steady. "Stop waiting for the powerful to grow a conscience," he said. "Force them to grow consequences." Then he got in the car, the door shut. Through the windshield, Ethan saw his reflection layered over the storm, the man who'd been humiliated mid-flight, now watching an empire fall from ground level. As the car pulled away, airport lights blurred in the rain, streaks of gold dissolving into gray. Inside, Miles sat in silence, the black recorder resting beside him. He pressed play one last time. Julia's voice again. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass again." His reply, calm and echoing through the speakers. "You think my seat doesn't fit my color, right?" Then static. Miles closed his eyes and let the sound fade. Not closure, but memory, preserved in data, immutable and unerasable. Outside, the storm rolled on, not ending, just clearing space for something cleaner to begin. The system had cracked, the silence was gone, and for once, justice didn't need applause to be real. 6 months later, the world had changed, not loudly, not cleanly, but undeniably. Airports now carried new signage, bias-free flight initiative. Every boarding gate displayed a hotline for discrimination complaints. Each aircraft carried a data transparency seal, the Carter Clause. And yet, beneath the reforms, the world still carried its quiet fractures. Miles Carter stood at a glass wall overlooking New York's LaGuardia Terminal. The city hummed beneath a muted spring sky. Sunlight diffused through low clouds. Travelers moved below him, ordinary people, faces of every shade and language, crossing paths without knowing whose defiance had altered their journey. Ethan approached from behind, now wearing the crisp uniform of an international equity liaison, a position created after the hearings. "They want you at the press conference in 10. Miles didn't turn. "You'll handle it." Ethan hesitated. "You really don't want to be there. They're naming the new policy framework after you." Miles's reflection in the glass didn't blink. "That's exactly why I shouldn't." Ethan half smiled. "You've built this entire thing and now you don't even want credit." "Credit builds monuments," Miles said. "I build accountability." Ethan nodded quietly. "Still, people need to see you. They need a face to remember what this meant." Miles finally turned. "If they only remember a face, they'll forget the fight." A silence settled, not cold, but resolute, across the terminal. A woman in a flight attendant's uniform walked briskly through the gate area. Julia Hayes. Her posture had changed, straighter, quieter. No trace of the self-assured superiority that once filled her steps. She wore the insignia of a new airline now, Unity Air. She noticed Miles at a distance, froze, then approached carefully. Ethan excused himself with a small nod and stepped away. Julia stopped a few feet short. "Mr. Carter." He studied her briefly. "Julia," she drew in a slow breath. "They reinstated my certification last month. Under supervision, of course. I'm flying again." "Good," Miles said simply. She hesitated, searching for something more. "I've been volunteering for bias training programs, speaking to new attendants about what I did." Miles's expression remained neutral, though his tone softened. "You're trying to convert guilt into education." She nodded faintly. "I figured that's the least I could do." He looked past her toward the runway. where a plane ascended through sunlight, breaking the clouds. Redemption isn't given, he said quietly. It's earned daily. Julia's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. I know, I just wanted to thank you, not for forgiving me, but for forcing the world to see what it hides. Miles turned back to her. Then make sure you never hide again. She nodded, whispered goodbye, and walked away. Ethan returned as her figure disappeared into the crowd. You handled that better than most people would. I didn't handle it, Miles said. I witnessed it. There's a difference. They stood in silence as the next plane took off, its engines roaring through the glass. Do you ever think it was worth it? Ethan asked quietly. Miles didn't answer immediately. His gaze traced the horizon, silver light against distant clouds. Justice costs differently for everyone, he said finally. For me, it costs peace. For her, it cost illusion. For them, he nodded toward the travelers below. It bought a chance to fly without fear. Ethan's voice was low. Then maybe that's enough. Miles adjusted his cufflink, picked up his carry-on, and started toward the private gate. Where are you going? Ethan asked. Zurich, Miles said. Corporate governance conference. They're about to discover the banking sector has the same disease aviation did. Ethan gave a rueful grin. You never stop, do you? Miles paused mid-stride. Stopping is how systems survive. He walked on, blending into the stream of travelers, until he looked like any other passenger, indistinguishable, untitled, deliberately ordinary. At the gate, the attendant scanned his boarding pass. Her eyes flicked briefly to his name, then met his gaze, warm, respectful, professional. Have a good flight, Mr. Carter. Miles nodded once. You too. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, the hum of the engines filled the air, a sound once tied to humiliation, now to reclamation. He took his seat in first class, placed his briefcase beside him, and looked out the window. The tarmac shimmered with heat. Beyond it, the skyline stretched endless, a reminder of how many systems still waited to be challenged. The plane began to taxi. The intercom crackled. Cabin crew, prepare for takeoff. As the engines roared, Miles closed his eyes. For the first time in months, he allowed himself stillness, not relief, not triumph, just stillness, earned through impact. Through the window, sunlight pierced the clouds, scattering over the wings like shards of glass. The aircraft rose, cutting through the gray, higher and higher until the storm was beneath it. Up here, the sky was unbroken, quiet, weightless, indifferent to color, class, or history. Miles looked down once more, whispered something no one heard, and turned away from the window. He didn't need to watch the world from above anymore. He'd already changed the air it breathed.